The Battle of Kepler 186 had ended 3 hours ago, but Sergeant Marcus Webb could still smell the burning metal and ozone that marked recent plasma fire. He moved through the wreckage of what had been a thriving colony settlement, his rifle held ready despite the all-clear signal. In 6 years of fighting the Krell Empire, he'd learned that clear was a relative term. There were always stragglers, always one more enemy soldier hiding in the rubble. His squad had dispersed to sweep the perimeter, leaving Marcus to check the commercial district alone. Standard procedure after a battle, efficient use of limited personnel. What wasn't standard was the sound that stopped him mid-step, a low, pained groan from inside a collapsed building. Marcus approached cautiously, his helmet's sensors detecting a single life sign beneath a pile of debris. The readings were strange, not human, not Krell, something else entirely. He keyed his comm. Webb here. Got a possible survivor in Sector 7, unknown species. Moving to investigate. Copy that, Webb. Be advised, Intel reports possible Krell reinforcements in the area. Make it quick. Marcus climbed over twisted metal supports and shattered plasticrete, following the life sign deeper into the ruins. In a pocket of space created by a fallen beam, he found her. She was stunning in a way that had nothing to do with human standards of beauty and everything to do with sheer presence. Her skin was a deep emerald green that seemed to shimmer in the dim light filtering through the rubble, marked with intricate silver patterns that looked like they'd been painted by an artist obsessed with flowing water. She stood roughly 6 feet tall, her frame lean and athletic, with 4 arms, 2 sets, one above the other, currently pinned beneath debris. Her face was angular but elegant, with large eyes that glowed a soft amber in the darkness. Those eyes fixed on him now, filled with pain and something else, determination. She wore the remnants of combat armor, but it wasn't Krell design. The insignia on her shoulder guard was unfamiliar, though the damage to her equipment told the story of someone who'd been in the thick of fighting. Easy, Marcus said, lowering his rifle but not setting it down. I'm with the Earth Defense Coalition. Are you injured? She said something in a language his translator didn't recognize, wincing as she tried to move. Then she switched to heavily accented but understandable Standard Galactic. Trapped, my lower arms crushed beneath the beam. Marcus assessed the situation quickly. The beam was massive, and her lower set of arms were indeed pinned beneath it at an angle that made him wince in sympathy. I'm going to get you out, don't move. Somewhat impossible to move, she replied dryly, and despite everything, Marcus found himself smiling. He examined the debris carefully, looking for leverage points. The beam was too heavy to lift directly, but there was a support structure he could shift to create space. He wedged his rifle against a piece of rubble to use as a lever. This is going to hurt, he warned. Everything hurts already, proceed. Marcus threw his weight against the makeshift lever. Metal groaned, dust cascaded down, and slowly, painfully, the beam shifted. The woman he needed to stop thinking of her as just the woman, used her upper arms to drag herself backward as soon as there was space, biting back a cry of pain. Once free, she collapsed against the wall, cradling her lower arms. Marcus could see they were badly damaged, possibly broken in multiple places. Without medical attention, infection or internal bleeding would kill her long before rescue arrived. Can you walk? He asked. She tested her legs, nodded. Yes, but my arms. I've got medical supplies, limited but enough to stabilize you. Marcus pulled out his field kit, already assessing what he had available. I'm Marcus, by the way, Marcus Webb. Kira Velshara, she replied, watching him with those luminous amber eyes, scout and forward operative for the Talvaran Confederacy. The name meant nothing to Marcus, but he filed it away for later. Right now, his priority was keeping her alive. He injected her with pain suppressants and began carefully splinting her lower arms using materials from his kit. The Talvarin Confederacy, he said as he worked. Never heard of you. What brings you to a human colony in the middle of a war zone? Reconnaissance, Kira said, her voice tight with pain despite the suppressants. My people have been monitoring the Krell expansion. When we learned they planned to attack Kepler 186, I was sent to observe and, if possible, warn the colonists. Were you the one who tipped off the defense forces? Marcus asked, suddenly understanding how the colony had been prepared enough to mount any defense at all. We got an anonymous warning 6 hours before the Krell arrived. That warning saved thousands of lives. Kira nodded slightly. I have some skill with communications systems. I thought if I could give you advance notice. Oh, you did more than that. You're a hero. Marcus finished securing the splints and sat back. Can you stand? She tested her weight, grimacing. Yes, slowly. They had barely made it 10 feet when Marcus's comm crackled to life. All units be advised, Krell scout ship detected entering atmosphere. ETA to your position 15 minutes. Recommend immediate evacuation. Marcus cursed under his breath. 15 minutes wasn't enough time to make it back to the rally point, not with Kira injured. They needed shelter, somewhere defensible where they could wait out whatever the Krell were planning. There's a supply bunker 300 meters west, Kira said, apparently reading his thoughts. Underground, the Krell scanners won't detect us there if we can reach it. You know the colony layout. I spent 3 days here before the attack. I know every building, every tunnel, every possible defensive position. She managed a pained smile. Reconnaissance, remember. They moved as quickly as Kira's injuries allowed, Marcus supporting her when the terrain got rough. The bunker entrance was concealed beneath the ruins of what had been a grocery store, exactly where she'd indicated. Marcus cleared the debris covering the access hatch and they descended into darkness. The bunker was small but well-stocked, emergency supplies, medical equipment, and best of all, a shielded power source that wouldn't register on Krell sensors. Marcus helped Kira settle onto a cot, then began setting up a perimeter alarm system using components from his pack. You're efficient, Kira observed, watching him work. 6 years of war teaches you efficiency or kills you, Marcus replied. Usually both. 6 years fighting the Krell, you must be either very skilled or very lucky. Bit of both, probably. He finished with the alarms and moved to check her splints. How long has the Talvarin Confederacy been monitoring the Krell? 15 years. We had unfortunate contact with them early in their expansion, lost 3 colonies before we understood what we were dealing with. Kira's voice darkened. The Krell don't negotiate, don't accept surrender. They simply consume everything in their path. Sounds familiar, Marcus said grimly. Earth lost 2 billion people in the first year of the war. We're still trying to figure out how to fight an enemy that sees every other species as either resources or obstacles. Yet you keep fighting. What else can we do? Roll over and die? Marcus pulled out ration packs and offered her one. Humanity's good at being stubborn. It's basically our defining characteristic. Kira took the ration pack with her upper hands, studying it curiously before opening it. The Talvarin Confederacy has been searching for allies, species capable of resisting the Krell long enough to build a coalition. Most collapse within months of first contact. And you think humans might be different. You warned an entire colony, evacuated civilians, and mounted a defense that successfully repelled a Krell battle group, Kira said. Yes, I think you might be different. That's why I'm here. Marcus sat back, processing this. You weren't just observing the battle, you were evaluating us. Yes, Kira met his eyes directly. My report will determine whether the Confederacy offers Earth an alliance or classifies humanity as another species likely to fall to the Krell. And what will your report say? Before she could answer, the bunker shook. Dust cascaded from the ceiling as explosions echoed from above. The Krell had arrived. Marcus killed the lights, relying on his helmet's night vision as he moved to the bunker entrance. Through the sealed hatch, he could hear the distinctive whine of Krell hover tanks, the heavy footfalls of their assault troops. They were doing a sweep looking for survivors or stragglers. A proximity alarm beeped softly, Krell soldiers passing within 50 meters of the bunker entrance. Marcus held his breath, his hand on his rifle. Beside him, Kira had gone completely still, her bioluminescent skin patterns dimming to near invisibility. A survival adaptation, he realized. The footsteps passed. The hover tank moved on, but they weren't clear yet. They'll do a complete grid search, Kira whispered. Standard Krell protocol after claiming territory. They'll find this bunker eventually. Then we need a plan that doesn't involve being found. Marcus studied the bunker layout. Is there another way out? Emergency maintenance tunnel there. She pointed with one of her upper arms. It leads to the water treatment facility, but it's likely collapsed or compromised, Marcus finished. Still, it's better than waiting here to be discovered. They gathered what supplies they could carry and entered the maintenance tunnel. It was cramped, dark, and smelled of mold and stagnant water. Marcus took point, his rifle ready, while Kira followed close behind despite her injuries. They'd gone maybe 100 meters when they heard it, movement ahead. Not Krell, the sounds were wrong, something else. Marcus raised his fist, signaling a halt. He crept forward, his helmet sensors struggling in the confined space. Around the next corner, he found them 6 human civilians, including 2 children, huddled in a widened section of the tunnel. They looked up at him with terrified eyes. "It's okay," Marcus said quickly, raising his visor so they could see his face. "I'm EDC, you're safe." "There's Krell everywhere," a woman said, clutching the younger child close. "We've been hiding here since the attack started. We don't know if the colony is still standing." "The colony held," Marcus assured her, "but there's a Krell scout ship doing cleanup sweeps. We need to get you to the rally point." That's when Kira emerged from the shadows behind him and the civilians recoiled in fear. "Alien," the man gasped, reaching for a piece of metal pipe. "She's with me," Marcus said firmly, positioning himself between them and Kira. "She's the reason any of us survived this attack. She sent the warning that gave us time to evacuate." The civilians looked uncertain, but the woman holding the child spoke up. "You sent the warning, you saved us." Kira nodded, her lower arm still held carefully against her torso. "I tried to help, I'm sorry I couldn't do more." Something shifted in the woman's expression. She looked at Kira, really looked at her, and saw not a threat but an injured person who'd risked everything to save strangers. "Thank you," she said simply. "Thank you for trying." Getting everyone out of the tunnels and safely to the rally point took 6 hours. Marcus led them through maintenance shafts, abandoned buildings, and drainage systems, avoiding Krell patrols by minutes at times. Kira, despite her injuries, used her knowledge of the colony layout to guide them, spotting shortcuts and safe paths that Marcus would never have found alone. When they finally emerged at the rally point, exhausted and filthy, the Marine lieutenant in charge took one look at Kira and immediately ordered her detained as a potential hostile. "Belay that order," Marcus said sharply. "This is Kira Velshara of the Talvaran Confederacy. She's the one who sent the warning that saved this colony. She's also the reason I was able to extract 6 civilians from behind Krell lines." "Sergeant, I don't care if she's the Queen of Sheba, Lieutenant." The voice was calm but carried absolute authority. Colonel Sarah Chen, commander of the Kepler 186 Defense Forces, stepped forward. "I'd like to hear what the sergeant has to say." Marcus gave his report, laying out everything: Kira's reconnaissance mission, her warning, how she'd been injured in the attack, and how her knowledge had enabled their escape. When he finished, Colonel Chen turned to Kira. "Is this accurate?" "Yes, Colonel," Kira replied. Though Sergeant Webb is being modest about his own actions, Without his assistance, I would have died in that rubble, and his leadership under pressure saved those civilians when many soldiers would have prioritized their own survival. Chen studied them both for a long moment. The Talvaran Confederacy, I know that name. We received a diplomatic overture from your people 6 months ago, but the message was incomplete. Something about a potential alliance. Yes, Colonel. My people have been fighting the Krell for 15 years. We've learned how to survive against them, but survival isn't victory. We need allies, strong allies. Kira straightened despite her obvious pain. I was sent to evaluate whether humanity could be such an ally. My report will determine the Confederacy's response. And what will that report say? Chen asked. Kira looked at Marcus, standing beside her covered in dust and dried blood, his expression weary but determined. She thought of how he'd pulled her from the rubble, how he'd protected civilians even when it put him at greater risk, how he'd stood between her and frightened people and demanded they see her as a person rather than a threat. It will say that humanity is exactly what we've been searching for, Kira said firmly. A species with the strength to resist, the courage to protect others, and the wisdom to recognize potential allies even in the aftermath of battle. It will recommend full alliance protocols be initiated immediately. Colonel Chen nodded slowly. Then let's talk alliance, Ms. Velshara, after you receive proper medical attention. She gestured to a medic. And Sergeant Webb, good work today. You may have just changed the course of this war. 3 months later, Marcus stood in the newly established Talvaran embassy on Earth, waiting as Kira emerged from a diplomatic meeting. Her lower arms had healed well thanks to Talvaran medical technology, and she moved with her characteristic grace. How'd it go? He asked. The alliance is official, Kira replied, her skin patterns brightening with pleasure. He'd learned to read her moods by those patterns. Joint military operations begin next month. Intelligence sharing starts immediately. And the Confederacy is sending technological assistance to upgrade Earth's defensive capabilities. All because you decided to warn a human colony. All because a human soldier decided to save an injured alien instead of leaving her to die, Kira corrected. You could have walked away from that rubble, Marcus. No one would have blamed you, but you didn't. You saw someone who needed help, and you helped. That's the kind of species worth fighting beside, Marcus smiled. You know what the funny thing is? I almost didn't go into that building, almost decided it wasn't worth the risk. But you did. And in the aftermath of battle, in the darkest moment, you discovered an ally. Kira's amber eyes held his. We both did, she was right. In the rubble and chaos, in the desperate aftermath of violence, two species had found each other. Not through grand diplomatic gestures or carefully negotiated treaties, but through one soldier's decision to help an injured stranger and one scout's determination to save people who weren't her own. Sometimes the most important alliances were forged not in palaces or assembly halls, but in the ruins where people showed who they truly were when everything else was stripped away. And sometimes the aftermath of battle wasn't just about counting casualties and damage. Sometimes it was about discovering that even in humanity's darkest hour, there were still those brave enough to reach out a hand and those wise enough to take it. The war with the Krell would continue for years. But humanity wouldn't face it alone anymore. They had allies now, forged in fire and blood, and one soldier's refusal to leave someone behind. That Marcus thought was worth all the battles yet to come.